The opinions expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
This is the Anime Roundtable Canada, presented by Anime North. Check us out on our linktree page for links to everything Anime Roundtable, from our old school blog, our old school email, and podcast site to our streaming video and socials, animeroundtable.com. Well, here we go on this Boxing Day 2025, Thursday evening, December 26, 2025. Right now, it's just Mike Nicolas here, sitting here at 6 points. James Austin in his little perch in Mississauga. Happy belated holidays, or I guess we can say happy holidays since it's ongoing. And thanks for making it, James. Thanks for making it tonight.
Yeah,
So
I
far.
had to get through all the Boxing Day crowds, right? Fighting for those tax-exempt items, I guess.
Yes. Okay, if you're keeping up in Canada, no taxes on a lot of items, including video games.
It's all the stuff that's bad for us. So all the food that had tax on it was stuff like junk food, and then some alcohol and things like that, and then video games and things of that nature. And I think board games and certain books, they were tax exempt, and then some kids stuff and things like that. But all the stuff for adults, it feels like, are things that probably would make us worse off or less healthy.
well, have you bought anything? Oh, well, you guys were talking about it last time in the space heater, right? So
Yeah, no, I bought a few video games since then that were tax free. One that I was expecting, and then another one went on sale this week for Boxing Day. I was going to get Visions of Mana. I ended up getting for $50 on the dot. So I'm like, at that point, might as well get with the tax-free, and it was on sale, so it was $30 off. But it's that one was a tough one, because that one came out end of August from Square Enix, and it was like their first new Mana game in like almost I want to say 15 years, to say the least. I think the last new one they had that a lot of people remember was Dawn of Mana for PS2. I know they had Children of Mana on DS, and then there was like a mobile title somewhere between Dawn of Mana and this one, but this is like a fully brand new one. They did bring out that collection for the Switch of Final Fantasy Adventure, Secret of Mana, and then Trials of Mana, which was the first time outside Japan that had shown up on the SNES, so that was in the collection. Then they remade Trials of Mana for PS4, Switch, and then I guess after that they felt confident enough, they made this new Visions of Mana title, which so far it's what you expect, and obviously has more modern graphics and things like that, but it's still the Mana experience, action RPG at its core and stuff like that. But the one sad thing, as they said, is we talk about, I know people have talked about layoffs and all this other things, and the studio so it wasn't a studio Square Enix owned, but it was a studio in Japan that Square Enix got to do, and I'm not sure if they were associated with either Krafton or Tencent or whatever, but literally either the day of or the day after Visions of Mana was released in August, they just shut down the studio. It was kind of wild. It's like, wow. But it's been that type of year and stuff like that across many industries and stuff like that, whether some people in the game industry want to believe it or not.
Well, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit.
But it's something of those things, you want to buy it and support it, right? But it's like, you buy it and what am I supporting now? You're hoping that Square Enix might decide to make another Mana game, hopefully. But the good thing about that is, like, if anyone wants to try out Visions of Mana, the good thing is they have a demo for Visions of Mana they had released, and it's a very long demo. So you can get a very good idea on the PS5 of what it's all about if you do want to get in and buy it later on, stuff like that. But $50, it was good to get that this week.
See, in my case, okay, I guess I did buy a video game, so I'll admit that. It's I never played Okami. I've never played Okami. And with the announcement that if you watch the Video Game Awards a couple weeks, how long ago was it? A week ago? Or almost 2 weeks ago now?
I would say like 2 or 3. It's usually like the 1 sec. I can check.
We double but we're talking. I think less than 2 weeks ago. But it was
2 weeks ago.
Oh, it was
on the 12th.
Okay,
but that was a bit more of a return to form for Mr. Keeley, even though it was tons of advertisements. But they at least let any of the winners basically actually have their say on stage instead of telling them like last year, wrap it up.
And then they had some people had a lot of fun with it. Look, the takeaway I got from the Video Game Awards was a lot of IPs. Like, forget the whole Naughty Dog thing, and everyone likes to rag on what's it called, the new IP that they introduced.
Oh man, and it was like profit. Like, it's interesting. Like, that one has so many question marks on it. Like, when I first saw it, I can see the Cowboy Bebop 5s and all that stuff, but then there was so much like in your face marketing. Like, you saw Sony, you saw she's in a spaceship that's supposed to look dilapidated, but it's a Porsche spaceship, and I'm like, well, what the heck does that even mean? And there were other like tie-ins. I think Adidas shoes was another one she was wearing. So it's kind of like, and it's like, okay, yeah, I understand you have to spend a lot of money to get this, so they were getting endorsements and stuff like that. But it just felt like, we'll see what happens. We have to wait to see gameplay and stuff like that.
It's Intergalactic. That was the name of the game. And
the Heretic Prophecy Intergalactic or something like that.
That's it, yeah. And they love to rag on, and people just love to rag on it. And okay, cool.
But no, there was Capcom had said, yeah, they're bringing back, and we saw that with force there because you mentioned Okami, and then we saw Kamiya-sama basically removed his whatever, and he has like so the new studio is a play on the old studio Clover, except it's Clovers plural, which is kind of funny to see and stuff like that. But they got them to hopefully make it again. It sounds like some people from Platinum, like we've heard rumblings on Platinum, but it sounds like a few of them maybe moving over to Clovers, which will be interesting to see how that works out. But they want to make Okami, and Capcom's given them the blessing, so we'll see what this true sequel turns out to be, because they did have the Okami Den one on the DS, which was fun, but a lot of people felt it was kind of a spin-off, so we'll see how this goes, and hopefully it does well. Like, they've done so many ports, right? And I enjoyed the Switch version. I'm not sure which one you played, Mike, whether it was, it was probably PS4, right?
I haven't played it, so I bought they had a digital copy of the PS4 version for cheap on sale. Mm-hmm. It's on sale in the PlayStation store, so yeah, I've gotten
it's on sale, and Switch as well, so it's everywhere, which is good for
so I'll take when I get time, and heavens knows I have a little bit of that these days. I'll try.
What was it?
Maybe I'll share it.
Onimusha's back too as well.
Onimusha is supposed to return.
And they have that, obviously. They did the first one, again, that is out on PS4 and Switch and stuff like that. That was one of the ones they did along the same time as Okami they released. So,
but it has me like, but when I see the Onimusha trailer, it kind of comes back to a common theme I love to use when it comes to our fandom, right? It's how many gamers now recognize Onimusha? How many of the like I get it. We can certainly use the argument that gamers are like, there are a lot of over 30 gamers. Okay, dare I say over 35 gamers. And the Onimusha franchise really was at its peak, give or take 20 years ago, I guess.
Well,
right?
it was through the PS2 that they had
Yeah,
most
it
of
was
the
through.
games and stuff like that.
And then it
Well,
was.
think of it this way: there's probably more that know that than know Dino Crisis, because there's tons of people that are hoping one day Dino Crisis will come back.
But as I said, but my point being, this is and even we can say that again with Dino Crisis too, even more so. My point being, the generational rift of fandom it goes with video games, it goes with anime too. And I'll throw in another title that probably has a few of those will have those same thoughts. When Sega announced that they're gonna renew the Virtua Fighter franchise too.
Well, that was interesting because they had a few of them, and it's like, oh, it's the same studio, the Yakuza studio, that they were talking about their new game in obviously the Yakuza in Hawaii. Then they had that other one that's early 20th century that I think isn't tied to Yakuza, but I forget what they called it.
It's the same entry. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
It's kind of like how they had the spin-off of Judgment and all that other stuff, and then they go in with Virtual Fighter, and it's like it's like, yeah, of course they're doing Virtual Fighter too, but that's interesting. So I wonder if Yu Suzuki they brought him just to try it out or something like that. You never know.
I suppose. I mean, you're right. Project Sentry, I believe, is the code name of the game you were just referring to from the same studio. And Yu Suzuki, obviously, creator of Virtual Fighter, creator of Shenmue. Is he involved in any of this?
That's what I was wondering. That's like, it'd be interesting just for Virtual Fighter to have something special like for him and all he did for the franchise or something like that. You know what I mean?
For a lot of franchises, but maybe the big solid they could do is help him. Shenmue, anyone? Shenmue. So
special Shenmue skin in Virtual Fighter.
Or just plain finish it, for God's sakes.
Well, you know, Shenmue, they've basically Yu Suzuki and them, they've said they moved, or EastNet, whatever his company is calling it, they moved the rights for Shenmue and stuff like that. So
I know.
Basically, it's now with Innen and stuff like that, and they're in Germany and stuff like that. So it's Innen and strictly limited games and stuff like that. They're gonna have a crack at, and we'll see how they do. And see, they're interesting because they're very passionate about retro games. They've done a lot of work with Taito and stuff like that. And on the Innen side, they get the stuff to the virtual storefronts. They do some great. They've done the Tango projects and stuff like that, which is the reimagining of games like Pocky and Rocky and others. Of course, I think. Oh, is it? I forget the one. It was Shadow Ninja, the one that Natsume did for the NES. They revived that one this year, and that was a fun one. But the funny thing is, it's great they have all the passion, but I know they've went through their troubles, especially on their strictly limited side, which is kind of like limited run, where they do orders and they do a limited batch. But there have been some games people have been waiting for 2 years to receive and stuff like that. So they've had their problems, to say the least. But hopefully, if they stick with Innen and stuff like that, it might get some interesting results. We'll see what happens.
Are they the ones that did Chain Soldier?
Sorry?
Hey, you made it. Are they the one that...
I'll be in and out for a bit, but I'll just respond while I eat here and there. But were they the ones that did Chain Soldier? Because I know that's one of those games that are taking like 2+ years for them to put out.
That one does not ring a bell and stuff like that, but I do know that there is not too much surprise on my side that they did get the rights to Shenmue, because before that, Yu Suzuki had worked on Air Twister, which is kind of like an on-rail shooter and stuff like that. They released for Switch and PS5, and they did that through Innen and strictly limited games. So,
and Kevin Ing, ladies and gentlemen, glad he's here too. So it's just the three of us this evening. Mohammed Shamarki, Amy Lynn Gregg got knocked out during Boxing Day.
The general notion I hear about Shenmue 3 is that Yu Suzuki needs to adapt Shenmue to a new generation.
Yeah, that seems to be the review. It's just really stuck in the past.
And that's the thing of they had such a long break and stuff like that, and people were like, "Oh, more Shenmue." But I think the key thing was, yeah, you want to respect the past and keep what it did, and yeah, it was kind of on the cutting edge of what it was trying to do way back when. But it can't hurt to take the lessons we've learned over all these years from other games and maybe incorporate them in to make for more playability and stuff like that, and maybe add some different ideas to fun.
You realize this debate can quickly turn, though, because we talk a lot about games getting lost and proper archiving and all that. Like, I mean, that's where I'm starting to go with it. And okay, maybe I can start to see where you want to go with it, right? Okay, Shenmue 1 and 2, keep them as they are, or remaster them and Kiwami them. Which way do you want to go? But then your the current the newest iteration is not updated in that sense. I guess, right? You have to choose. So maybe you make your choice that way.
The first thing I think of whenever I think of Shenmue is the Lucky Hit game.
Okay. I think
only because one of the streamers I like to watch nowadays, this VTuber spent a lot of time playing Lucky Hit.
Okay. So there's where I am, and I did download all the Shenmue games. Also, they're on sale. So, as I said, as I joke, maybe I got time to play sooner or later. But you know what? That's perhaps other stuff to come. Time to get to the business at hand, though, and why I wanted to have the roundtable gather tonight. Last couple days, let's say week, I guess. It's been an interesting week plus for Sony and Kadokawa. And okay, the assignment I gave to everybody, and only 2 of you are here to complete it. We put up those articles. Sony has made a bunch of news over the last week, but whether it's the results of their attempted full acquisition of Kadokawa, which, by the way, they just became the biggest major stakeholder, and we'll have to preface that when we get to that part of the story. And then a Bloomberg article. Which everybody is talking about now, I think, or a lot of people who like to keep up with this stuff, and a good chunk of fandom certainly does. Cecilia D'Anastasio, Takashi Mochizuki, they came out with an article about how seemingly the inner workings inside Crunchyroll are, and it's not the most flattering piece. We're going to get to that. And then we just
not been the same since Lance left.
Yeah, and Lance had his say on the article with that, and we'll get to and we'll bring that up.
Interesting on the Bloomberg side because both of those two would mostly do the game side, so it's interesting they decide to look at the anime side this time.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense given Sony's place in the gaming pantheons and stuff like that. So
and makes sense, and it makes great sense to us because we constantly argue about the overlap between our fandoms, between anime fandom and video game fandom. So it made total sense that they wanted to talk about it, and of course, you can't discount the idea that what happens here won't affect or will have some sort of effect on the other at some point down the road. And, which comes back to our long time discussion about the pillars, about Sony's pillars moving forward, what their priorities are and how they want to leverage all of it into each other. So basically this is an update, like an not so flattering thought as to how all that integration is going. And then somebody really good. We've never mentioned Richardson Hanjaja by name, but he does some really good stuff, some really insightful work on on his Substack newsletter called Animenomics. And the stuff he put out really puts things into an interesting perspective. And he gave a few numbers basically to update and kind of back up some of the sentiment going on that was highlighted in the Bloomberg article. Lance Heiskel, who Kevin just mentioned, yeah, he chimed in. Let's go there. And then two more thoughts. NHK kind of highlighting that the anime industry sales topped 3 trillion yen, or the better part of $21 billion, which probably puts into perspective what is at stake here, and that we're not totally chalking chump change. But as I said, let's keep that in perspective. And then a CNN article that caught my attention, which talked about, well, Sony as a whole, and that, okay, you want to paint this picture about what's going on within Crunchyroll, and how bad Sony is doing. Well, it depends on your perspective, because maybe Sony is okay, and this is just business, right? So the assignment I gave everybody when I posted all these 6 thoughts, it's a collective of 6 thoughts, is, can I use the words verbatim again that I gave? The theme is basically how the stories both complement and contradict each other at the same time, or just plain clash, depending on how you want to look at it. That was the assignment. Where do we start on all of this? Where do you want to start, James? I mean, we talked about this for like a good hour, which is a phone call conversation I wish I recorded. Right? I wish we could record that.
I guess it makes more sense to continue where we left off from last time, because we had talked about Kadokawa and Sony and all the things about.
So let's get back to so basically we're going to go back to the Space Eater chat from the 8th. Is that where we want to start?
Yeah, it probably makes more sense. And I had made mention, obviously, that Kadokawa and stuff like that, this was 2 parties that were willing to talk to each other. This wasn't like hostile on either Sony's end, Kadokawa's end. And that we had talked about the one Korean company that had one of the larger stakes in Kadokawa and had been buying up some of their shares and stuff like that over, I guess, the year and they were worried about that. And I think that was the Korea Security Depository, Samsung. And supposedly from Anime News Network, they said at present, as far as they knew, 10.01% of Kadokawa shares belong to them. And that obviously Sony would jump over them.
But as of so the numbers I'm seeing, are those present, or will they be as the deal closes? No, it'll be as the deal closes on January 7th, as everything closes.
Yeah, but 7th, I think the Sony one, they might try to get them a little higher in that. We'll see what happens, how much higher from 9.68, or if they're going to still be in that ballpark.
Or will they get over the 10 mark as well?
Because I think they'd want them a little closer and stuff like that, because you never know how it's going to go. But I think, as we had said before, there was this thing that both of them are Japanese companies. They want them to stay. They want to stay as a domestic company. There was a lot of goodwill on the Kadokawa side of having Sony come in from their employees and stuff like that after what their management had been through over the course of the year, and the fact that they had some cyber attacks over the course of this year, and they had not went well. And one of the things we found out recently is that Kadokawa actually paid one of the cyber attackers and stuff like that, which is never a good thing, because they're just going to keep on coming back at you probably. And so that, and Nico, I think that division was where the biggest issue was, because they shut down a lot of that for a while to actually fix it all up, and that probably took them a few months.
Yeah.
So they were in deep trouble. So that probably didn't help them. And so having Sony probably help them basically fend off any foreign takeovers and stuff like that was one thing. And then maybe I'm guessing they're hoping they can help them in other avenues and stuff like that for their business, just like Sony's hoping that Kadokawa will help them, because maybe they said they didn't exactly want everything from Kadokawa. Maybe they didn't want all the publishing parts like light novels, manga, and all that stuff. But what they did want was the video game portions, which would help them, like the FromSoft and others, that would help the games division. But of course, the anime side, they want to be on those committees. They want to influence Kadokawa to say, hey, some of those publishing light novels and books, we want to make these into anime first and then get them on to Crunchyroll and stuff like that and be in the inside lane, so to speak, right? But not having full ownership and responsibility.
The line I used was the note I made to myself was expand Kadokawa IPs into global live actions that Sony can produce, I guess. And ultimately hold a hand and hold a influence in terms of their ultimate distributions around the world, right?
And yeah, you had the anime, and then as you said on the live action, that would probably be more on the game side. Like I could see them use FromSoft and stuff like that and say, hey guys, look what we did with The Last of Us and stuff like that, right? Where they say, hey, we got onto HBO, we've made it a success, we've released the first two games, which people are like, why are we doing this when it's from last generation? But obviously it's to kind of bring this mix into the fore, as we always talk about with the HBO show and the games and stuff like that, because some of them may not have played those games, even though it was just last generation, right? And you could see that with some of FromSoft stuff. Maybe they could use some of that, and it would probably work well in an HBO format. You know what I mean? Since a lot of those are more mature.
Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of little possibilities. I guess the only real issue, you mentioned the publishing. And so, you know what? It sort of reminded me about, Sony as a hardware company and their foray into making ebook devices. And, well, that didn't pan out. But they're not really into that, are they? And so what becomes there? Or really, it's a non-issue because it's not as if Sony has the type of control.
Like there's a lot of different factors in that, as we said. Like there is publishing. We forget Square Enix in Japan does publishing and stuff like that for actual manga, things like that, and you forget about that until, remember, they brought their own publishing thing over to North America for their manga and art books, but it's small at the moment compared to everything else. But for Sony and for Kadokawa, it's interesting that the publishing part of Kadokawa has so many things going on there. You have the magazines, the physical books for manga and light novel and all that. You have Bookwalker, which is their online presence and stuff like that, and selling their ebooks and all that, factoring in, which is an interesting thing to see how that works, especially with what we talked about with Visa and MasterCard, because remember, they probably have some things they're selling in Japan they probably aren't selling on Bookwalker, for example, in other regions and stuff like that because of content or what have you and stuff like that. And Bookwalker does deal with all the other publishers and stuff like that, not just Kadokawa itself. And then the other weird thing we forget about Bookwalker is underneath that, they do have Geeks Plus and stuff like that, which has all their different streamers and Trash Taste and all that stuff. And then, as we talked about, somewhere in that mix is Anime News Network.
It's just great. It's just awesome that, Crunchyroll it does have its news outlet, ANN, does have it, and then Kadokawa has its news outlet with ANN.
It's interesting when
within all that you have, and then you have two major podcasts, Anime Effect and Trash Taste, which in theory could be under similar umbrellas, or at least adjacent umbrellas, if not similar, if not the same one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just, okay. We'll take them at their word that everyone will be independent here.
Well, A&N has stated that so long as it's still Chris, right? It's still Chris McDonald.
Yeah,
McDonald's
Chris
still
McDonald, and he
publisher,
made sure in the contract. So there's a lot in there that they
Let
have to go
me
through.
elaborate on that. Let me elaborate on that. Basically, he said, so long as I'm around, we have control of editorial content.
which is great. But that this is the dilemma about having major corporations who have who will have an interest in editorial let's be honest, it's just that's always going to hang over. Just ask Jeff Bezos and the Post and Amazon, right?
Because I believe that was written in their contract when they were purchased.
Yeah, no, he made sure there
which
was
is cool.
definitely contractual stipulations in there, and hopefully, as we said, like they probably read them line by line. Now, that's not to say it'll actually work out that way. Like, hopefully, it will protect them to a degree. But we've seen what's happened with Right Stuff and the Dirty Pair Kickstarter, and we can get onto that later. But that I know Sean Kleckner had thought he had bulletproof that, and it's turned into its own swamp.
And the list and that's where and those are my sentiments.
And then it's interesting when you think about
it's great when it works, but it works until it doesn't, right?
And you think about the news. Obviously, they had one for Funimation and Crunchyroll, and it feels like, from what I've seen, the Funimation part, and we've seen that in the one article, kind of, even though Crunchyroll was the name they took, Funimation is still the beating heart of that company and stuff like that. And like Nicolas Freeman, that did news and was one of the last ones at Funimation. Now he's on Crunchyroll and he's helping run that news ship, and so to speak. And I know they had many other people at Crunchyroll before that. Like, remember Patrick Macias was running Crunchyroll News for a while in the early days and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, many people know him, like he's done Otaku USA. He's done a lot of stuff at the early days of Viz and stuff like that, way back with Pulp and stuff like that. And then him and Matt all have a podcast together. I know they were
with Pure Tokyo Scope, right? And and hopefully we can talk to either of them in the new year. We'll talk about resolutions in a bit at the end. So, do you want to start going into the Bloomberg article just a little bit then, since you've kind of hinted on it, James?
Well, I guess we probably should say what actually became. Well, most people already know what became that. Basically, Sony and Kadokawa basically said, instead of Sony taking over Kadokawa, basically Sony would become the largest shareholder and stuff like that. So, I think people have agreed is for the best and stuff like that, and that the two companies would be, and a lot of companies in Japan love this, which is strategic capital and business alliance, just like we saw that with Funimation and Crunchyroll way back when, right? For what, that lasted a year or 2 years?
Oh yeah, that before the buyout, right?
Okay, yeah, so before. So it's
before that,
and then they love these,
and then the reopening of old wounds, anyway, right?
But basically, with this alliance, as we said, they're hoping each to get something out of it, which we've already talked about. It's like maybe getting some properties on Crunchyroll and getting things through the pipeline faster, since we've heard getting new projects off the ground for anime, it can sometimes take 2 years because everyone's booked up for animation studios and recording studios and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And to get on the committees, everyone wants to be on those production committees. So, but
Don't
basically, Sony said largest shareholder trying to hold approximately 10%. And what we saw from the list, they were at 9.68. We'll see if they stay around there, but it'll be interesting.
But to kind of keep it all at bay, Kadokawa states what Sony Group is the largest major stakeholder, I guess. Sony Group being, and that quote, trust business operators holding the shares as trust property, and so it has been determined that they do not constitute major shareholders or the largest major shareholder. And so that's the view that by which Korea Security Depository, Samsung, and the Master Trust Bank of Japan Limited are viewed as, because those are they hold larger shares at this point as of the 7th, as the deal closes. I guess the same can ultimately be said of Goldman Sachs or Custody Bank Japan Limited or Nihon NTT. I guess Nihon Telegraph Telephone Corp, that's NTT. But then again, at 2%, who's counting, right?
Yeah, it all depends what they all decide to do if anyone bands together. And I'm sure we've seen that with Ubisoft and stuff like that, because they're in the thick of it with something like that, where it's like all these people have the knives out to see who's going to take them private. But in this case, it's interesting. So they only paid $318 million US approximately to get where they are now and stuff like that. So it would have been interesting to see what the valuation would have been for the whole thing. But they were saying that would have been a tough thing for Sony to grapple with, right? So, and then, but it looks like, they said, so it's like further expansion of the scope of Kadokawa's game publishing, which helps for Sony, and then distribution of Kadokawa's publications, which probably means the pipeline of their manga and light novels into anime and stuff like that. But they talk about ebooks by Sony Group, so it's going to be interesting to see, well, what do they bring to Bookwalker and stuff like that.
And the list goes on, right? Okay, now do you want to go into Bloomberg? Are we ready to go there now? This is the meat. This is the meat.
And it was interesting too. You had mentioned live action, and now I see what you're saying. They had mentioned live action and TV dramas, so that's another interesting globally to see how that works and stuff like that.
It's a tragedy, all right.
You don't think it? Well, I know you.
Because I'm thinking, like, they talk about anime, and we always think Crunchyroll anime, right? And they do have a bit of live action, but where does their live action ambitions go? Are they going to go and try to expand a bit of that on Crunchyroll? They're probably not going to do their own thing, or are they going to go to Netflix or somewhere else, right?
Well, I want to. Boy, we have a lot to talk about, because that's another part of the debate. I think that's another angle, another branch to take later on if we have time to go there, right? Okay, can we go Bloomberg?
Yeah, we can go to Bloomberg.
Well, everything, I've made it so that everything kind of all comes together anyway into one nice messy little package. Thanks for putting up the Bloomberg, the BNN Bloomberg version of this article.
Well, I originally tried to go to the one, and I'm like, oh yeah, Bloomberg is paywalled.
Yeah, the regular Bloomberg.
We go to the Canadian source, which is BNN Bloomberg, which BNN has still got some sort of thing with Bloomberg going on. Thank goodness, because that allows us to see the article without having to go
advertising. But this is
there are ways around that if you look hard enough.
I know, but where I was about to go was, well, that's it's facilitated because Bell Media, which owns BNN, has made a partnership with Bloomberg on the topic of big conglomerates and all that stuff, right? We're able to read this article at length because we're looking at it through the Bell version of the website, through the Canadian version, which is owned by a conglomerate. Really,
it's very interesting to see how the Evil Blue company is moving away from its other interests, namely its sports media.
Well, in some way,
whereas the Evil Red company is now going all in on that because Edward always wanted to do that kind of stuff. I guess that's a topic for another day.
But differing priorities. It's sort of like where the priorities of PlayStation and Xbox are going too, right?
Well, everything can be an Xbox, Mike.
Exactly,
those cupboards behind you, Mike, they could be an Xbox.
Shut up, James. James, shut up.
Woo, that's good.
Hey man, I'm just spouting what they're telling. Like anything can be an Xbox. Did you look under your seat? There's an Xbox there.
That's what Phil wants us to believe.
That was good.
If something's green, it's probably an Xbox. So they
My
cried.
dick's an Xbox, I guess, if that's the case.
My denture cleaner box, sure.
Well, if you've seen the shelves, Kevin, you know that those green shelves
From
are
the 70s.
very, very thin.
From the 70s. Oh. Anyway.
Yeah, my Nintendo Switch is an Xbox too, apparently.
Well, yeah. Microsoft or Xbox needs the money. Okay.
Well, they're trying with Game Pass, but I don't know what they're going to do.
It's clear they don't want to make consoles anymore.
No, that's the move away, I guess.
Yeah, they say they're going to, but it's like they're all over the place. But I think, as you said, they're not going to be in that space, that hardware space anymore, and stuff like that. They want to use the video game side and be in the content space and stuff like that. And it's kind of similar to what we're talking about with Sony in a way, so to speak, because remember, it was hardware, and then they started to move to content, remember, at the end of the 80s and 90s with the movie studios and all that stuff they bought, and then getting up the video game side and stuff like that. And originally, that was supposed to be a partnership, remember, with Nintendo, before Yamauchi saw basically what Sony would get based on the discs, and we're talking about the CDs and stuff like that. And he says, no way, we want a cut of that. We're not doing that. And just at the last minute pulled the plug on the deal and said, we're going with Philips. And that ticked off Katsuragi and stuff like that. He said, no, we're making this happen. And that set the Sony PlayStation on its course, so to speak, that we're celebrating now.
Yeah, I know. LFG, let's fucking go, right? Afterwards.
The thing that Microsoft no longer has any franchises that I care about, except for maybe Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Well, there's quality. In your case, quality, not quantity.
They had Indiana.
Because Tecmo Koei is no longer locked to Microsoft. I was always very upset at them because that meant I couldn't play Dead or Alive 3 onwards at the time. I'm so mad when that happened. I love Dead or Alive.
And remember
why, Kevin? I wonder why.
Oh, it's costing me an ion here.
Probably for the same reasons I did. Who cares? Anyway,
the games were good. Don't get me wrong. Like, sure. Like, the women are beautiful.
I mean, I still have my swimsuit issues during the Nomi.
The fighting, the games were always pretty decent at the time. They were always competent fighting games.
Yeah, they were.
It's just we've gone to the point where it's snowballed into the whole grab your aspect with the Extreme franchise, and the way that has gone so pay to play is pretty unappealing. I'll be honest.
Well, it's kind of
they don't need to make the fighting game anymore as a result. And it didn't help that DOA was it DOA 6 or DOA 5 that didn't do that well. I don't remember anymore.
I forget where they even got to on that, but it's funny on 2 points where you mentioned, to go back to the Game Awards, another one that came back, Ninja Gaiden actually is coming back, and it's .mu that is going to help bring that back, and it's going to be 2D and stuff like that. So that'll be interesting, a nice refresher on that franchise, since we had just talked about the 3D Xbox trilogy, so to speak. And then the other thing that's interesting thinking about it is Indiana Jones. Remember, that was supposed to be, because Bethesda, Xbox exclusive, and they said, oh yeah, it's going to stay with Xbox. And then they said, oh, by the way, it's now out on Xbox, but it's going to come next year to PS5 and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's not the first time that's happened.
Well, it was funnier too, like, because they had the best performance, right, at the Game Awards, and so they always have a star. So they brought out Harrison Ford this year to help introduce that with Troy Baker, who did Indie in the Game and all that stuff. That was interesting.
Viral moment. My line was always, my line now that I think about it is, what about Soul Calibur? So, we lost Kevin. Well, I'll get him back in a few minutes, I guess.
But, that's Bandai Namco, so we'll have to see what they do with Soul Calibur, but that'd still be a fun one to bring back.
Yeah, I would. So, while we wait for Kevin to come back, Bloomberg. Let's go back there. Well, okay. So,
Are we talking about the cartoons for children there, Mike? Is that what we're talking about?
that's a hell of a comment. I mean, okay, and that's where the clashes start to begin. But first of all, let's get Kevin back onto the stage. Hello, Kevin. Now we can see you. Okay, cool.
We're talking about the cartoons, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want my Soul Calibur back too, but I probably wouldn't own a system to play it on anyway. Unfortunately.
Well, you never. Well, who's to say?
Well, I can't justify it on a console. I would have this conversation already.
Yeah, over one game, sure, I understand that.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 games max. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the Bloomberg article. Anastasio Mochizuki.
And they usually do the video game beats and stuff like that.
Once again,
so it's
it was just. I just loved how they started it off and then start to try to make sense of what was going of maybe a part of what's going on behind the scenes. So, competition, Netflix, Disney, Amazon, a big thing. What the article basically started off with the idea, Sony's lead in anime is under attack, right? And that in some cases they've been overtaken in terms of what they offer in terms of or where the money comes from in terms of anime streaming these days, right? Just to cite the parrot statistics that Richard that Hanjaja brought up. Netflix contributes about 2.07 billion in terms of anime subscribers. I guess that's the line. We can correct. Feel free to correct, guys.
Yeah, they were saying so. It's anime contributions to the streamer's revenue, and that's one of the charts that he was bringing up from Perot Analytics and stuff like that. And they were talking about Netflix being a bit ahead of Crunchyroll and stuff like that, and Hulu and Prime catching up and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's where we are there, and then Hulu and Prime catching up. Netflix already overtook, although sometimes it's just good to be huge, and I mean huge when you're Netflix. I mean they're still glowing off the NFL from yesterday.
I think Netflix, like the big help on them, it's kind of like the origin story of Crunchyroll. Remember, where basically, they're like, we got all this investment capital. We basically had to take down everything because everything was pirated. And then they were able to make that deal with TV Tokyo to get Naruto and some of those big ones on there. And those were the most popular things at the time. And then basically at present, we've seen what's happened with Netflix where they've started to poach a few things. They've gotten some JoJo exclusivity. They've gotten One Piece in the form of a live action that was successful enough that they can continue that on and stuff like that project with them. So it kind of like brings it all together in a way that if you have the right mix or the right projects, it can definitely give you a boost.
Yeah. And well, yes. And then so Netflix is doing great in that sense. And when it comes to anime, right? So the picture that starts to be painted from that point is okay. Crunchyroll lost its number one ranking in that sense. What's going on at Crunchyroll? And then the picture starts to be painted, or a picture starts to be painted, and it's not a friendly one. Bunch of 18 current and former employees were according to the article, interviewed. And they paint a picture of, how over time employee support for management's vision for Crunchyroll has been down. How ambitions into, aside from their subscriber count, into other aspects like video games, like e-commerce, they've all struggled. And that, a bullet point I made, and maybe this kind of contributes to where how Netflix did it, or how Netflix has overtaken a growth in casual fans, not hardcore ones. So they gravitate to the easy places.
And that was the thing too. They've gotten enough, and then some that may be hardcore may decide, you know what, which one am I going to pull the plug on? They may go there as well, but they're definitely getting, if you're casual or you're just certain series and stuff like that, you're probably maybe going to go more mainstream. You'll go to Netflix or to even Hulu. And Hulu, as we know, and I think in the article, they make it sound like, yes, they're a platform, but a lot of the stuff they have on there, it's not them, it's third parties coming to them and putting the content on Hulu and stuff like that, like Viz Media putting a lot of their stuff onto Hulu and stuff like that because they don't have a platform.
Yeah, which comes back to, what about Canada? What about Canada? What
No.
about Canada?
There's a Hulu Japan, Mike.
Huh?
There's a Hulu in Japan, Mike.
Right, exactly, right?
Nothing.
I mean...
And then, as you said, like Hulu's interesting because it was all those broadcasters, and Disney, I think, now has most of it now.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they have Disney Plus and they're making their own exclusivity deals, like with Tokyo Revengers and others.
Yeah, and no, it's not as if Star really does anything, right, in Canada, which is meant to be the holder of a lot of that Hulu content in Canada. So anyway, of course, the pushback is there. Of course, the pushback from Sony is there. It's outperforming our expectations. Which very corporate speak, right?
Well, yeah, I think I saw that first line from that, and people were making fun of it. Like, it was, what was it? There's never been a more exciting time to be an anime fan, and we are strategically feeding a pipeline of anime content and experiences that fuels that fandom, deepens the love of anime, and exposes more audiences to the medium. And that made me think of, and I think a few people had weren't saying it exactly like that, but it made me go back to that old Bandai visual, we understand anime fans wants.
Oh, basically the Anime Village initiative back in the 90s?
Oh, well, that's going even further back.
Anyway, well, but everyone likes to point at when Crunchyroll was bought out by Sony, and more specifically Funimation, right? And the forced merger. We always knew about a tense relationship even before all of this, right? Because they did have arrangements before.
Yeah, the 1 or 2 years of the strategic alliance to fend off against Prime and Netflix. And remember, Prime had Anime Strike back then, and that kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, well, never say never. Never say never about a return, I guess. Okay, that's another discussion. Who knows? But it just sounded like everyone decided, to reopen the wounds from all of that, right? It's like getting back together with an ex, but still airing your dirty laundry as you get back together. And there's no choice. You're getting back together.
Yeah, you were saying that, I guess one of the stories was about an infamous Zoom meeting. Yeah. Talking about the decision, I guess, of Funimation, Sony basically buying up Crunchyroll and basically
the Funimation people
accusing Crunchyroll of being pirates and alluding to their history and
to the past, right?
They were pirates, yeah.
Yeah, sure, okay.
And then you wonder how many of those employees were from way back when, because remember when they finally were going legit and they were still getting those letters basically from Funimation and Bandai and stuff like that, and the Funimation and Bandai ones were fairly strongly worded and stuff like that, basically saying, hey, we're here to protect our rights holders and stuff like that and all this other stuff. So
and what it's and then at a point it became, well, okay, we've been talking with them too,
and it kind of goes into that later in the article about the Japanese side, right, about their feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so let's just keep going down. I'm just going to go down the list, the article as it evolves, right? Good culture brought up the pirate past. People, as the merger happened, people started leaving. Colin Decker, Joanne Wag, is that how we pronounce her name? The former GM?
Yeah, like a lot of people knew, about Colin Decker. I guess some of them you don't know, but Colin Decker, remember, he was on some of the credits and stuff like that when they were doing co-pros and stuff like that, like with the reboot of Fruits Basket and stuff like that. And now obviously it's the new guy that if they have any of those, he's on there and stuff like that.
Is it the guy we're going to talk about a bit later? Okay. So with it comes new management, and this is the line. This is the key line, right? The line about, okay, a resistance to hire fans. Just pencil pushers, just bean counters. More like it, right? So, and people think that's, you know, and there's the divide, there's the tension, that whole being out of touch, the kids cartoon comment that's cited in the article, right?
And I guess it kind of ties into what Lance Heiskel, former marketing guy at Funimation, he had posted a few tweets about the article, and it kind of comes back to that part of the article and stuff like that, where he was thinking back to the crash in 2008 with anime and stuff like that, when ADV and Genion went away and stuff like that. And when Funimation had to, like, even though they were the strongest position, they still had to find their way through. And they were still with Naver at the time, because remember, Naver had basically, they had sold out to them. And then that's when Gen basically bought back the company with some billionaire friends, and then basically sold it again for a profit to Sony, or a part of Sony and stuff like that later on. But
Gen just keeps on winning.
well, he's the only guy that probably got rich off anime. Let's put it that way and stuff like that, and more power to him, right?
Right.
But all I can say is that, yeah, I don't know how you make that happen, but somehow he's the only one that made that happen of all of them.
Anyway,
Still chairman, or did he finally retire?
I think he's finally retired and stuff like that. Like, remember, he held, like, when he sold to Sony, like, it was a very small amount still left of Funimation or whatever it is. Like, it was like less than 5% or something like that. It could have been 1% that he held. So, but he's probably gotten rid of that, I figure, by now, especially since they kind of were putting them all together. Remember, with Aniplex, with Funimation, with Madman, with manga, and now with Crunchyroll.
I'm going to look this up out of curiosity.
But the thing for what Lance was talking about was he was talking about people they were bringing in at one time, because they were bringing in, before they got sold to Sony and stuff like that, and were going that route, they had brought in guys from Universal and stuff like that. And there was an idea, I think, that they were going to go with Sony and Universal and have them fight for them and stuff like that. But Universal ended up just saying, "No, we're not going to do that." But one of the guys, I think he said that they had hired a Universal exec as their COO, and he was going to take him to Otakon, I guess, one year, basically to experience the customers.
We're coming back to Lance one more time, and basically how excruciating it was, right? How excruciating it was to try and get them to understand, try and get those execs who really didn't know.
Yeah, talk to the industry folks and stuff like that, and that he said he hoped that would give them a better idea instead of putting more money into other consultants and stuff like that. But he said, unfortunately, the new CEO from basically Universal decided, you know what, we're still going to hire a consultant firm to figure out the buying personas for their hype videos and marketing plans and all that stuff, trying to reinvent a wheel that didn't need to be reinvented, as he said.
Mm-hmm. And he walked away, basically saying, I can't do this anymore, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so he stepped down in 2019, and then when I looked through Wikipedia quickly, he said, during an October 2023 seminar at Columbia Business School's Center on Japanese Economy and Business, Fukunaga was asked by an audience member why he chose to retire from Funimation. Fukunaga replied, quote, honestly, after cashing out twice in the company, I really didn't need to work for a living anymore, end quote. There you go.
That's all I can say.
And remember, his original partners when he started Funimation, they decide they were just cashing out once. He got to cash out twice.
Mm-hmm.
Living your best life, dude. Living your best life. Okay. So let's go back to present, though. Right? Okay. So management out of touch, struggles, a couple rounds of layoffs, but still a hope to be able to, what's the phrase? The 25 by 25 initiative, 25 million paying subscribers by the end of 2025, which would hopefully be used to make a subscriber base to compete with rights like
That's
Netflix.
not going to happen at this point.
Well, that was the intention, right?
But yeah,
it became dependent, but it just became like when you looked into the initiative itself and the crux, at least according to Bloomberg, it depended on those 25 million subscribers, a good chunk of them coming from certain places, and it wasn't working out that way.
How they calculate them and what those subscribers cost, because not all of them are equal, as we know.
Yeah, I'd love to have a $1 per month subscription to Crunchyroll.
Why don't you go to India then, Mike?
Yeah,
we can go and live in India. We can go to New Delhi or Mumbai and stuff like that. And they even have some English dubs in that they have. And some of them, they've been even redubbing in English in India for some bizarre reason. It's kind of like the South Asia dubs. You know what I mean? For English.
So having failed all of that.
And they're dubbing in local languages, which we had talked about before. And it's like, I understand why they're going after that market. It's just, I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but it'll be interesting to see.
But I'm not saying having failed all of that, because it's ongoing, but another part of the whole thing was just keep hanging on to your subscribers, preventing the churn, as they call it, the monthly churn, which they want to keep at 8.5%. I guess I was part of that, right? When I said I canceled I let my Crunchyroll subscription lapse. Although I always love to tell that story about how it lapsed. I tried to pay for another year. The credit card didn't go through. Tried to put in another one. It wasn't recognized. Then the subscription lapsed, and I just haven't bothered since.
Yeah,
right?
They were saying that churn is interesting. They were saying that the actual rate could be higher than this, I guess, 8.5. And above the 5% churn rate of typical streaming services.
Where you hope to be, where they think it should, where where it ideally should be, where Crunchyroll wants to limit it, and where it could be, right? 8.5, probably worse, right?
And the other thing that hurts them, remember, is they have a bit of live action, some bit of music videos, but then they have at the bread and butter, it's just anime. So since it's one thing, and yes, they have the largest catalog and stuff like that, that gives you one thing to say, do I really want this one thing when I can just get a small piece of that one thing somewhere else, like Netflix or wherever?
Yeah. And then,
because what if I'm just watching One Piece? Maybe I'm just going to go elsewhere because One Piece is at other places.
One Piece, right? And this is where it starts to get, and with all these troubles, and they just kind of snowballed on each other.
But yeah, that 25 by 25, the 25 million subscribers, they said they're hoping for the end of 2025, but who knows if that can ever be met. And it was the other interesting thing we had made mention, that it seems like even though it's Crunchyroll in name, it's basically still Funimation behind the curtain and stuff like that, especially with the employees and stuff like that, the way it feels like from what we've talked about before.
Right. That is very interesting to hear. Well, I guess we shouldn't be that surprised, though.
No, we shouldn't be. It's just business. But then, they try other ways, and you don't fault companies and businesses. I could never fault this. You try and spread yourself.
It's as if they knew that Crunchyroll's brand was better than theirs in the fan conscious, so then they casted the old name aside, and now they're wearing the sheep's clothing.
Yeah, I know the sheep's clothing. Look,
they want the global brand, and now they live with it.
Sure, Score, Pen Gaming. ESPN Bet. If you keep up with those industries, I guess that's where I came from. You kind of understand, right? Future Shop, Best Buy, right? So the list just keeps going and on and on. But my point, but where I was going with this was, okay, with all this happening and then a lot of other things going wrong, nicely snowballing, you know, buying outright stuff, but divesting themselves of but the demand to get rid of the adult stuff, which actually comprised, but now in the process, shrinking rights, what right stuff could do for you, because it comprised a lot of that. 5% of revenue from right stuff.
That was the interesting part, was the merchandising part and right stuff. And it's interesting, 5% at that time. And I wonder how much more that would have been now, because there have been other players on the manga side of the 18 plus industry that have started to come in and be more aggressive.
Yep.
And it makes you wonder if there could have been some growth there, and then there seems to have been growth in the figure part
and
too.
I was about to say they've probably made some sort of inroads. I wouldn't doubt it anyway. Mobile games.
It makes me wonder what the ties are between Right Stuff and the Buy Anime people, because the site looks eerily similar to Right Stuff.
And they might have sold basically their back end to them. You know what I mean?
So who's to say? Well, what's to say now, right?
Because obviously they might have talked to Crunchyroll, but Crunchyroll's like, no, we're going with our way or the highway. And we've seen that basically they they left it for a year, then they scrapped everything. And now it's just kind of a mess sometimes to try to get around it sometimes, to make sure sometimes coupons don't work. The other thing is that they had talked about, we're going to keep the way we ship the same as always. It's going to be carefully packaged and all that stuff. And past year, basically, we've seen that's pretty much all a lie. And basically, and even stuff from Grimes, Iowa, isn't going to be packaged like it used to. And I think the big one a lot of people saw, and they have tons of pictures and tons of reviews on what was shipped for the Macross Plus special edition, and a lot of people got a lot of dents, a lot of breaks, and a lot of things, because it's just, we throw it in a box and they had one piece of paper over top, and that was it.
No packing, no biodegradable packing peanuts.
No, oh, you mean Robert from that corner store? Yeah, no, But I think that was interesting, because they said over the summer, Crunchyroll had laid off employees working in its video games and e-commerce initiative, which I'm assuming is right stuff, because we know they had let go some people based on the Dirty Pair Kickstarter and stuff like that, because some of the people that were running that, like Judy and that, they had left and things like that. And a lot of the production people from Nozomi, they had left. So we know anything from Nozomi basically is on a print, I would assume. So if you want something from them physically, you probably better get it now, or you're probably going to be paying more for it. And then the most recent update from the Dirty Pair Kickstarter was quite telling, because we don't know who's running or who's doing the updates anymore. It's just some random ghost from within Sony that is posting stuff on the Kickstarter page.
It's some intern.
I was about to say it's AI.
It could be AI, but it's really good AI. Anyway, but the thing is, the last update they said, we're going back to Japan for approvals and stuff like that for our packaging and all this other stuff. And Judy had said they had already done that like a year and a half ago. And people are like, why the bleep are you going back? And there were some vicious comments in there about why the bleep are you going back to do these reapprovals and that. And some people are like, I bet you they're just scrubbing Nozomi from all of the discs, from all of the covers, from everything. It's going to say Crunchyroll, but because of contracts the way they are, they have to go back to get them like reapproved just to have the silly Crunchyroll symbol on there. You know what I mean? And the fact
probably
that Nozomi isn't going to be authoring. It's not going to be authored in Iowa. It's going to be authored in Dallas.
It'll be under their name. I get it. Okay. All right.
They lay those people off.
Okay.
So, and we've heard that people haven't been too happy about the quality sometimes coming out of Dallas, because I know they haven't been safe over there in like QC and trying to make the discs, because some of them have been let go. And like a recent one, I know this month, it was one of the ones where it was a movie and there were two different movies and they came in a set. And when they offered the discs, so for the labeling of the disc, you think what you're putting is the correct movie. It was the opposite movie for each disc. They mislabeled the discs
Wow.
on this December release. It was crazy.
Feels like a Chemical Orange Road release. Okay, so let's keep going down the article. Yeah. So with all that going on, Toei, they're following the money. Netflix, Beastars on Netflix, One Piece on Netflix, right? So in the back end of the article, we're introduced to Marcus Girdman. Not to say I'm familiar with him.
Oh boy, I read that part of the article. I was like, oh.
Yeah, for
As
marketing.
I said, this isn't meant to be flattering, right? It wasn't flattering, right? So Marcus Girdman, who becomes a senior vice president marketing, sounded clueless, right?
Doesn't really know anime.
Doesn't really seem to know anime all that well.
So they said he was from Netflix. He's unorthodox, has little experience, as we said, in anime.
But he's from
he
Netflix.
brought a camaraderie of people to the company, which I'm sure they just love, right?
Yeah, a boys club, right? A boys club from other ad execs or other ad friends, right? From his days in the advertising world.
And I think they had some interesting ones. So one was San Diego Comic-Con this year. They had a One Piece event held at San Diego Bay during San Diego Comic-Con, stuff like that. And obviously they said Toei representatives were underwhelmed with how this One Piece concert went and stuff like that. And it definitely does not sound like that went well at all. And supposedly Girdman oversaw that event, so that's not a good sign.
Mm-hmm. So we have the One Piece incident,
and then Toho was Dan, and they're saying that he had sent an email not to promote,
really downplay its promotion at best.
And I know a lot of people. That one's interesting in a way, because I know why some people would be like, "Why are you doing that for one of the most popular series of the season?" Some of it I can see, because it is on Netflix, it is on Crunchyroll. Both of them are not really promoting it and stuff like that. There is
not their show,
but yeah, it's not their show because it's Toho and G Kids. Because remember, Toho and G Kids, before we knew streaming, they announced they had the rights to do Blu-ray and theatrical and all that. So basically, that is, as Kevin said, it's not really their show, and they don't feel that it's probably going to get to their 25 million subscribers up by the end of 2025, or help them get there for whatever reason, because it's not their show. They want it to be their show.
And so far, maybe
Kadokawa, so they can get more of their shows, right?
And they might be right so far, because we think of it more with Netflix, if anything. So I don't know if it's helped. Obviously, or seemingly, it hasn't gained them any subscribers. It just hasn't really hurt Netflix either. Well, that's kind of another story altogether. That's not really a fair statement, because Netflix is just Netflix.
It's probably like, as we said, Dan is kind of like having
happy. It's like the fourth child in a family, a happy accident. So, but the thing is, like, Netflix has a bunch of other things going for it. I mean, Squid Game 2 came out today, right? So
a lot I think some of the ones they had. They had mentioned older series, but I think the more recent one, in some memories, was they did get Delicious in Dungeon and stuff like that for Netflix, and that was a big one for them, and they were all in for it because that was one of their exclusives, right? So,
But yeah, once again, but
A
it does.
Dan is kind of like, oh, it's just along with One Piece and stuff like that. It's going to help us along and stuff like that. And we can maybe use the algorithm to send them somewhere else, right? To
Yes,
maybe
but
one
all
of
you
their
need to-
series.
I know, but all you need to know right now, 2.07 billion over 1.16 billion. That's all you really need to know about that part of the story. And it was just based on sheer scale. So surely it's turned out to be an okay business ploy in that sense. But the list keeps going on and on for Marcus Girdman, right? Unhappy culture, tense culture, human HR complaints, right?
I thought you were going to say HR nightmare.
Publishers unhappy with CR merchandise management and rights. Items in ways, quote unquote, they didn't approve. Major mangaka upset as characters were used in ways they didn't want. And Crunchyroll's
It mentioned Shokaku-kan, Shueisha, Kodansha, and as you said, then you add on top of that the mangaka themselves, which is a big no-no, because remember, in Japan, as we know, they are the king. They are the ultimate authority and stuff like that. And some of it, you wonder about, is it how they're throwing it on certain parts of their website? What are they doing with it in the store now with merchandising and stuff like that? Like, how are they doing that end of it? Because some of those you never know. Like, maybe they didn't want the ugly Christmas sweater to be sold with their character in a certain way. I have a
story. I have a great story. Remind me to get to that before we really walk away from this part of the.
No, just tell us now, Mike.
Okay. One of the most infamous pieces of merchandise that happened in the last 30 years, and if you really keep up, especially on the perverted side of things.
Sailor and the Seven Balls?
Nope. The Hello Kitty vibrator.
Oh, that.
You know the story. You now know the story, right? Or you have a sense of the story, right, Kevin?
Of the story.
Okay, James, you know the story? Or you kind of have a sense of this story? The Hello Kitty vibrator?
I believe I do.
I just know that like Neil or Adam brought it up in the distant past.
Yeah. So we have to kind of remind people of that. There was a massager. There was a handheld massager that had the Hello Kitty license. And that was popular. But then suddenly this massager started appearing in JAV in Japanese porn videos and scenes. And Sanrio got wind of that, and they certainly didn't like it. They tried to stop the production of it, but the manufacturer of the product knew what they had. They kept it. They kept making it. They wouldn't stop. I'm having fun with this. Really, I'm having fun with this. And then at a point, that manufacturer went belly up. And all their property became, available. And so Sanrio made it a point to pick up the molds from that massager to make sure they can destroy them and never make sure this item could never be made again.
But how could this company go belly up if they sold so many Hello Kitty vibrators? Makes you wonder.
It wasn't enough. It really wasn't. So so maybe it may be
that's just mismanagement in the end.
Sure, why not? That happens in business, does it not? But there's a story. There's a case of the creators and holders not agreeing with the merchandise.
Yeah, they talked about posters and figures. I could see figures definitely, because depending on what type of figure they're making and the quality, some of the quality can vary very greatly from the high end to the low end.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could have googly eyes or things that you didn't expect on the figure.
Yeah. So there you go. And that's part of it. Disagreements on, like, everyone, as I said, people love to pile on, dogpile as it all goes. Crunchyroll's own sales reports not seen as trustworthy because of its caveat for revenue sharing purposes, which in turn could be used for acquisitions of IPs or distribution of IPs, if not outright ownerships. And maybe it also lends credence as to the movement and this is how we start to tie things together just a little bit, right? Could incentivize other studios to look for other distribution partners. I mean, Lance Heiskel kind of said it in the first part of his Twitter thread. Just said the companies like competition. They don't like the idea that this could be a monopoly. So
they want them to bid up the rights, as we say.
Yeah. So, competition is good,
and some of them may not be able to stream on some of the platforms because they don't agree with their content, as we know.
Right. And could incentivize other studios to work. But when you take all of this and all the problems going on, and just understand, it made sense perhaps to try to go after Kadokawa for Sony. With all their issues, to try and go after Kadokawa to make their lives a little easier in terms of acquisitions for material, for content to put onto Crunchyroll and to expand it. But looking back on it, and we wondered, Sony has all this potential to be its own streamer, to be a mainstream streamer. And every major studio had its opportunity, or trying a version of that. CBS with Paramount Plus, Peacock, Universal, right? And of course, Disney, ABC, etc. And Sony, in its own way, could do that. Look at their history as a legacy media group with Sony Pictures. How could they? I always wondered to myself, could they try to use Crunchyroll in some way to do that? I mean, you remember me saying that this line of thinking back 3 years ago when all of this was announced. What could happen, right? Warner Brothers, or what are they called now? Warner Discovery, and Max and HBO, right? They could go it on there by themselves, or as another part of the discussion says, maybe keep their IPs and then play all of these guys against each other, which is what happened with Last of Us and Max and HBO. We'll get to that part a bit later on, right? So, and we got time. When do you have to go to sleep, James? So there's all of this all going on. And before we continue, and before I say, and all the reaction has been so visceral. It's hilarious to read. A lot of people are cheering all this on, thinking Sony is in some sort of, they're dying. And I just thought, boy,
that's what the stock price was saying.
Not the stock price was saying. Fandom's giving themselves, I think, too much credit. Like the worst of us, the worst parts of fandom is giving themselves way too much credit as to what they think they can do to Sony. Sony's too big to fail in that sense. We're certain fandom as a whole cannot. How big are we as a fandom? But okay, so and James, I'm now going to use the line that I used in our phone call, okay? And I'm going to propose it to Kevin and think about it, because in some ways this is another part that ties it all up. Okay? And it's going to be roundabout. Jordan Heath Rawlings. You know who Jordan Heath Rawlings is? Kevin?
I don't.
Okay. He used to be of Rogers. He was the creator of one of Rogers' signature podcasts, the Frequency Podcast Network. That's Rogers. He was the host and creator of The Big Story, which is their daily news podcast. Really well done show, right? And around the layoffs about a month ago, he was laid off. His IP still remains though, and it's now hosted by other people. By other Rogers personalities. So basically, they just increased their workload seemingly. Here, you work for News Radio. Here, another assignment for you. Host this episode of Big Story. Jordan Heath Rawlings was exclusively just a podcaster, and since he was forced away from the show, he hasn't hit it. It's on his X account. he started his own Substack and has written a couple articles. One of those articles came out a couple days ago, and he talked about his he looked back on an interview he did with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and looked at and thought about, their downturn, how their political fortunes has plummeted, and how it probably will inevitably lead, and the polls suggest this, to a conservative government sometime in the spring, because almost certainly we're going to have a federal election. And, Trudeau defending his record against all this public backlash, on everything, trying to say have an I gotcha moment with him, right? And then Jordan Heath Rawlings just came up with one line that kind of summed up the whole idea that, progressive incumbent politicians have lost understanding of where they are in the world, especially if these progressive politicians are presently in power. We just saw it happen in the States. And it's probably happening in a lot of ways around the world. This single statement, and maybe it's almost a paraphrase: my feelings don't care about your facts. This is fandom sentiment, right? Fact is for Sony, yeah, they're doing fine. They're doing great. But boy, their PR is so bad. They suck. We're all angry at them. Fans are angry. Anime fandom is angry at them. Everyone wants Sony to fail. That's the whole my feelings don't care about your facts line. Just keep that concept in mind as we go through the last part of talking about all of this.
Well, if you think about it, as we say, right, Mike, it's like, if they really want that to happen, guess what would happen? They would just close down the Crunchyroll part of Sony and stuff like that and continue on like it was a normal day the next day. And then how would they feel?
No, here's the thing. Once again, coming back to all that backlash, to all that Schadenfreude that a lot of fans want to have over Sony. Okay, Sony fails. They go down. All those IPs are free. Are they really free? Or they're just forever locked up in purgatory? It's not as if a company goes down, that what becomes of the IPs? Maybe there's an auction, or maybe they just become a cross for 30 years.
I think luckily it's not like it used to be. So the likely scenario would be it would go back to the original license holders. But if it had been 20 years ago or something like that, or older contracts, then you would be very worried and stuff like that, because they wouldn't have thought of all the possibilities, so to speak, right?
Right.
I mean, it's free if you want it to be.
Well, I get that part too. A lot of that sentiment is piracy anyway. Big deal. Big whoop. Who are you kidding? Right? Who are you kidding on all that? But it's interesting to read some of those comments, and maybe I sort of regret it too. So you juxtapose all of this, but you juxtapose all of this. So I'm going to go to the my feelings don't care about your facts, or the facts don't care about your feelings line. Because the last part of all of this to me, is a couple of two more articles. NHK talked about the anime industry getting into 3 trillion yen territory this year. That's about $21 billion US. But that's just that's just a primer, but also just to understand, it's there, it's on NHK. Hey, it's NHK, the state broadcaster, right? And then maybe just a respect as to what is at stake here, and a reminder that this is a big business. And part of it's part of a larger machine, which brings me to the last one, the CNN article that I brought up. John Tofigi, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sony hasn't been this hot since the Walkman, the share prices, right? Right, James?
Yeah.
Right. They missed out on smartphones. They've been trying to recover for more than 2 decades, almost 3. the shift away from from hardware. Well, yeah, the PlayStation's worked out, but yeah, they started off as a electronics company, and yes, the PlayStation has worked out, but
and you think about it too, they have their TV still. They still have the private line and all that other stuff.
Fact is, hardware has been high. Cost of making hardware has been high, and yeah, it's like keeping up with the Joneses. Just ask Apple. Just ask Samsung right now with their smartphones, right? So
the other thing is, who powers the TVs for Sony? It's Google.
These days,
Google's the one powering them and stuff like that.
But now the shift becomes more to But yeah, once again, a reminder of where their shift is from electronics, from hardware to content and entertainment. Once again, I talk about all those pillars, right?
And it's what we had talked about before, where it started way in the early 90s and all that stuff, where they started going towards the content, right?
Yeah, sure. And what they're looking for right now, when we talked about the pillars, the synergy between all those pillars, right? I guess it's an ongoing thing. I guess the only thing I gave them too much credit, I thought could happen sooner, is them finding that synergy sooner. But obviously, it's a little bit more complicated. What am I, a businessman? So.
Because, yeah, they have, as we know, when you think of Sony and their games and stuff like that, it's the quote-unquote AAA prestige games where it's all about storytelling and all that stuff. And that does work well with trying to then put into another pillar, like either movies or TV shows and stuff like that. And we've seen Last of Us went TV and HBO, prestige TV, and we've seen Uncharted, another Naughty Dog one, of course. They were going the movie route.
Yeah, which has had mixed results at best. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the Spider-Verse failure this month, right? So, and once again, leads to all this, hey, Sony's failing. No, this is Sony, forever doing their trial and error, I guess. Because some things are doing fine. Some things are hitting. And somebody who can do who makes their value matter or thinks that all matters has thought, okay, this is okay. It's not that bad. Otherwise, how the hell did the stock price get that high? Or are we talking a GameStop thing? Right? I mean, we're on the topic of video games, right?
And so, as they said, it's many more opportunities to either bring certain things that they said to the big screen or to the small screen, if you want to say that, because of Last of Us, or even the opposite way of maybe taking something they have from the movie studios and bringing it over to the video game side, right?
Yeah, I mean, okay, it's not the most artistically fun, interesting thing. I guess that's what fans look for, but it's a business. I mean, this is the lucky part for Sony. Its survival isn't based right now, regardless of all the bad press right now. Regardless of the bad press this is giving them, which how many of the rest of the world really knows about? But it isn't about this isn't a popularity contest. In the end, it's not based on a popularity contest. Unlike for Justin Trudeau or democracy, it's not based on popular sentiment or democracy. It's cash rules everything around me. Dollar bill, y'all.
Oh, you just had to slip that in.
Right? Tell me I'm wrong, though. Or, okay, I mean, maybe it's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Well, you're not wrong.
So,
well,
but I get it. I get where some of the venom is coming from. Bad translations, not paying the industry workers all that well. Hey, that's why I also said,
And the problem is some of it is updated, but they never tell us it's updated on Crunchyroll. Yeah. Well, and sometimes a bad, like, them leaving a certain version of the show that maybe is not up to snuff, or subtitles that are not up to snuff, and they just leave it there for eternity. They never get to the home video version, if that even gets a home video version for that show, because nothing's guaranteed anymore.
Right. But here's where I am on this all as we start to end this, as I start to conclude the discussion, which is of course always going to be ongoing, right? At the outset of the merger of the buy in 2021, we all wondered, where would the competition all come from? Would somebody rise? Would somebody unknown to us, some little company unknown to us, rise and be able to make an offering? Obviously, that has not happened. So we start to think, okay, maybe it's going to be in the incumbents, in the mainstream streamers, and that seems to be the part of the story that's going. And I said as we start to realize this, I forgot when, but I certainly had said it in the last couple of years. Welcome it. Maybe it'll force a few hands at Crunchyroll. Maybe just maybe, and this is the rose-colored glasses in me. Maybe they'll do some good for the people who work in those industries, the animators, the script writers, the translators, the dubbers. I guess jury's out on that one. I don't know how well paying Netflix really is. Can somebody answer that for a second? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
We haven't seen either way, but we do know
Crunchyroll
has decided, instead of going the way that Funimation and Sentai had been for rates, that they seem to have went to the Crunchyroll rates, which were lower, and they kind of got into that situation because of how Crunchyroll started out with their rates and how they had bought out that one company, remember, that was doing the subs and the translation for them, and it became a part of their machine, right?
Right. But there you go. So I don't know how it's going inside Netflix, but the competition is there, and it's not as if Sony were just going to back down. It's not as if they were going to be taken to their knees. They might get a shiner. But look me straight in the eye. How are they really doing? They're still there.
Just depends on which big ones they get one season and which big ones the other guys get next season, right? Because
who gets what, right? But be modest with your goals. Maybe 20, maybe 15 by 25.
But yeah, that 25 by 2025, probably isn't happening with what they had, I think, at present and stuff like that. Like if we look at the beginning of the article, I think, and they were talking about paying customers and stuff like that. They were saying around 15 million, stuff like that. So that's still a lot to get, and that'd be a lot of people from India at $1 each to get to 25 by 25.
What's the population there? Look,
over 1 billion. So that's probably why they went there.
Two more thoughts. A couple more thoughts. I know I'm having a bunch of other thoughts, but I just remembered these are some parts of my notes that I thought were worth mentioning. One, a lot of that Schadenfreude fandom has also said, Japanese companies, we're begging you, open up the shop yourself, open up your own means. Should they spring for their own overseas distribution? But then, what do they know about business in overseas?
I wonder if they remember what happened with Bandai Visual USA.
Well, my line was, which is a fair point. My line is, as much as we like to say how it is for an overseas company difficult it would be for an overseas company to want to do business with a Japanese studio or whatever it is, the Japanese businesses don't cut. Here's the sword. How do you think they really would fare if said companies try and come out themselves? Not to say they're not going to try, because there are offices.
And we've seen how K-manga has went and stuff like that. It's like...
But, right? And there's the but, right? One last thing, and maybe on more of a historical note. On the whole topic of Sony and content, just keep in mind, yes, we've noted things from the 90s, but it does go further back. There is one key part that does go further back, and that's the music section. I think it was in the 60s.
And it was CBS, I believe, they had made to deal with, and that came full circle in the 90s in that. Because remember, they could have been on the cusp with the music side and stuff like that and continued on, but then Steve Jobs kind of pulled the rug out from under them with the iPod and then later on with the iPhone.
Right. But my point being, when you look at the history of Sony and content, it isn't just the 90s. It's the music side that started in I believe the 60s with CBS, with Epic Records. And who was one of their bigger names at the time? There's a bunch of names that are all big, but they did have the single biggest at the time. And he was there until his end, when Michael Jackson passed away in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
That's always worth, and you notice how Michael Jackson also did his stints in Japan. Now you can kind of connect the dots there. Just a few, anyway. But
Wait,
those are all.
what do you do? I don't know that.
Huh? Well, I mean,
what did Michael Jackson do in Japan?
Nothing. I mean, he was a global phenomenon, but surely
it was like many actors. They would go to Japan and they would just make bang for their buck. So
yeah,
advertisements, the shows, the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, that's which is something else altogether, which is not part and parcel to all of this, I think, right? But it's worth but that's just part of the story too. And so it's not to say, let's just say they're looking at ways of optimizing in this world. Right. And I get it. The whole passion. One last thing. Okay. And the whole hiring fans line and not hiring fans. Okay. That's our clash. That's our generational clash. Maybe just the way of doing business. Right. I mean, it is an old way of doing business to get bean counters who probably don't have that passion because they're not blurred by that. They're not blurred by being a fan when having to make tough decisions. And that might have been a good way back then, and it still might be a way. I get it. Times have changed. Maybe a passionate fan does have a better beat on things now. And this is also just having to deal with one fact about this segment of fandom. This is like, you're not going to find anybody more engaged about their industry who know these things, who try to keep up with these things than anime fans and maybe video game fandom. They keep up with everything. They're so locked in, they're so connected in that sense that maybe you'd be surprised. And that's part of the way of doing things in the 2020s, halfway through it. That we're constantly trying to reconcile in this evolution, which I'm curious to constantly keep up with, right? So the story will continue. Can't wait to see what happens next. But as I said, 15 for 2025.
Actually, a funny thing there, Mike. That story we talked about. So the Bloomberg one came out on December 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 days later, on the 23rd, if you want to do a little juxtaposition, a story came out from Variety.
Yes,
Variety.
Okay. Oh, about
Sony's most recent acquisition, which is Variety said Sony Pictures plans to release Mamoru Hosoda's new film Scarlet, his new anime film, in winter 2025. So Sony Pictures is going to release Mamoru Hosoda's new anime film Scarlet next year, winter 2025, which is interesting. So the machine keeps on going and turning and stuff like that. And that was one of the ones, because remember, we were watching the last Hosoda film and stuff like that, and we had made note, I think, of the Sony Pictures logo and all that stuff. Or was it Shinkai? It might have been Shinkai, actually. Makoto Shinkai. It might have been that one we saw, where we saw it wasn't about Crunchyroll, it was about Sony Pictures and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Sony Pictures logo at the very beginning. Yeah.
So you're going to get a Sony Pictures logo for the new Hosoda film, just like we did for last Makoto Shinkai. So they're still going to be there, whether you like it or not, even if Crunchyroll disappears and stuff like that. But it said Sony Pictures is going to release it outside of Japan and stuff like that. And Toho is the one that's releasing it in Japan. So Toho does Japan, Sony Pictures does outside. So Toho can't be that angry at them, or at least at the Sony Pictures division.
Yeah. Oh, so maybe where we're hoping for the Death Watch, it's not Sony, it's Crunchyroll. Who knows, right? But there's, as I said, thoughts to think about. Maybe I directed my anger improperly here. Okay. I'm off my soapbox. Thanks, James. I see the link. As I said, I'm off my soapbox. Kevin, how was your? Just quickly before we go, James and I talked about our Boxing Days, our Christmas holidays. How was the shopping today? That's why you're late.
Well, I didn't get to shop for very long, but I bought some stuff for myself and some stuff for the store.
Did you buy some hardcover books at Indigo?
I have 2 on the way from the warehouse that I'm going to attempt to refund and repurchase before the end of the sale.
I think that's
one of those.
Yeah, that's in store, right? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
so one of them is Saint Young Men, Volume 10. The other one is the Metamorphosis Hard Edition from Shindo L. That one, I don't know if it will work because
they don't do that in store. And I was going to say, how is that in? They sometimes get stuff earlier than other places. Let's just say that.
Well, here's the thing. So when you go on the website, they don't list it as a hardcover. They list it as leather bound.
Hey, okay.
So it will depend on what the sales associate does in the end.
But I wonder, do they allow those ones that would be similar for Berserk, Trigun, Hellsing, and Vinland Saga? Because those would be a similar thing, right? Where they're hardcover but they're letter bound or something? I don't know.
I've seen it work on... I've seen them work before because I've bought Blade of the Immortal in the past.
Yeah, Blade of the Immortal is another one, yeah, so that should...
Anyway.
So it should be fine. Other ones I didn't get around to planning to purchase as quickly as I should have, so I'm missing 1 or 2 volumes of the Bakano hardcovers, and I should have done that back in November.
So, since you mentioned that FAQ title, Kevin, is that going to be the one, because I'm listening to the radio as I'm going to work, and they have chapters Indigo, and Santa is trying to figure out what he's getting for people and is asking Heather from Indigo what he should get for them. So if they said, what they were asking for a FAQ title, do you think she's going to say that title?
Way to go. Oh, okay. Another thought. Do we want to go PlayStation handheld stuff, or do I want to save that for another time?
Yeah, all I want to say,
save it for another time.
All I want to say, I'll just repeat myself. I want Heather to give us another fucking manga sale.
Hopefully we see that in the new year, in January, like last year, but it's going to be interesting.
No, there's no pattern to it anymore, James.
Cream money, dude. Cream money. They know where they are. They know what they are in this world, especially in the Canadian world.
No spring sale this year, to my knowledge.
No, yeah.
The only one we got was that one in January, so all we can hope for is January, buy 3, get 1 free.
No, there was not even a general spring sale, if I'm not mistaken.
But yeah, there was no general spring, and there was no general Black Friday or winter sale either.
There was no general fall sale per se, but apparently what a couple of people had told me was that I don't know if it required a purchase, but there were times where they were giving out bookmarks that said that you can use this to redeem for a 20% off purchase.
Well,
and then it was stackable with Plum Plus. So that's how they kind of sneakily did that sale.
On the topic,
or was it in store? It's like one of those things. Do you go in store and they want you to go into the stores?
Yes, that's exactly it.
On the topic of churn, though, I've let my Plum Plus membership expire, I'll wait. Although
I renewed it finally, but
yeah, I'm in no hurry.
I didn't do it in time because I didn't get my points bonus like you normally would, and then also,
I get that. Yeah, the limited time points upon renewal, I get it.
but I think because of the hack, I was able to reset my birthday back to February, so I think I'm going to be forced to actually use my birthday plus Plum Plus to buy some manga that I really don't want to risk missing out, including some FAQ titles.
Good luck. I was about to say happy shopping, and I was also about to say if you're waiting for another sale, just wait for the next data breach. Okay.
Well, truth be told, like Harry T is doing 30 off for manga this year. It just kind of depends on what they have in stock.
Who's doing it?
Harry Tarantula.
Yeah, Harry T.
Up in North York now. Yeah, they're further up young.
Okay.
So I was there today. I managed to buy something that I didn't expect to see. Also, I think Beguiling's only doing 10% off, maybe? I don't remember.
No, it said 20% off.
Oh,
so they
20.
said almost all regularly priced in-stock in-print product released before December are 20% off. And then they said they have 3,500 deep discount items for 80% off. So your mileage may vary depending on the titles you're looking at.
Yeah, it looks like they really need to clear out space is what's happening, because I've noticed that they've been bundling a lot more of their older stuff into complete or like concurrent run sets, and actually
they used to always do that. I thought in the old store where they would bundle things together and you'd see them on top of the shelves.
Not like they did, but it wasn't ongoing stuff. It was always old stuff, or out of print stuff.
Anyway,
but now they're actually doing it for like things that might not necessarily be finished.
Okay.
I think it leads me to believe that they want to try and clear some space out.
Space is good, dude. Space is good. Oh, okay. I did want to bring up one last thing before we end off tonight. I'll do the whole Sony handheld thing because we've used up enough time.
And quickly, Anime Extreme, they brought back their normal like quasi okay sale. Like you have to spend at least $250 to get any sort of discount, I think. But then apparently, they've now added that manga will be US cover if you buy at least 3 books.
I'll be selective as to when I visit. Okay.
You're never going there.
Look, I will. And anybody who keeps up with anime in Toronto will knows Anime Extreme, and anybody who's kept up long enough also knows Anime Extreme's history when it comes to the anime scene in Toronto too. On the topic of stores in the anime scene, I'd be remiss. Amy did want me to mention this, and I did want to bring it, and I did at some point want to bring this up. The Gashapon pop-up that's been in Union Station since the summer. It's roughly the summer. Is that safe to say?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay. I visited it for the first time because I was there doing some gig work in that area around Union Station on Thursday, so a week ago, and I decided to actually check it out. Took me a little bit to find them. It turned out that they had actually moved for the season. They were right at if you had been there in Union Station and had been there, and anyone familiar with it and were familiar with their current site or the site at the time of the beginning of the pop-up, it was at the top of the escalators. It was pretty tough to miss as you came out of the subway, or I guess coming from the GO station too. Just go up the tall escalator. Just go up the newly built tall escalator, and then just look to your left. It was right there. They had moved for the season to the opposite corner of that section, a bit out of the way and really not exactly easy to find. And I think the space is noticeably smaller, more cramped. It certainly the way employees position, single employee I saw in there position themselves certainly made it feel like it was trade down furnishings or trade down accommodations. In the spot where they had been, Mastermind did their seasonal pop up. If you know Mastermind, it's like it's a toy store and a board game store, and I guess they sell some board games, right? So the size of that is certainly at least a third bigger. A third bigger, I guess. It's but noticeably bigger than where they are before. It certainly was a step down in terms of their space. So I did go inside, take a look, had a nice conversation with the lady there. Took a couple business cards right here, as you can see in my hand, and they told me. And first of all, Amy, sorry, I didn't buy anything. I am on a budget right now. They told me that they will be back in the other spot where Mastermind is after they clear out after the season. And that they'll be there for the entirety of, or pretty much the entirety of 2025. So this pop-up is a little bit more long-term. They're put on by a store called Spare Time. They are hoping to expand a little bit more. I want to give them a quick shout out because, small business. Why not, right? Especially in this city. And they hope to open up a few more locations aside from this one. I don't know what became of their location in North York because they are there at Empress Walk. I think they've have an Empress Walk location near a subway station there. Same complex. I've heard various rumors that for now it's closed. That's closed.
That's what I had heard too, and I think Amy did bring that up last time.
So, but things have seemingly they're happy with how things are going, and they're looking to expand. I want to give them a quick shout out, just to give them just to mention them again, and hope that they're doing and cheer them on, and maybe a bit of a bribe because we're hoping to talk with one of their employees on a future episode. So that's almost that. I do get the feeling that this is episode 93 of the the version 2 era. This is probably going to be the last regular episode we do in 2024. I do get the feeling, though, we're not totally done for 2024. I could foresee at least a space heater, if not, or an On My Mind as we end 2024, which means I got to do something. Any resolutions? Or should I say? Or should we should I just be a little bit more? Go back on my soapbox later on to where in less than a week.
I have one, but I'm keeping it to myself.
Cool. Otherwise, it will never come true. James,
I would say the same and stuff like that as Kevin.
I have a list of both personal and one's related to this podcast. I will give at least one right now in relation to this podcast, and it's a very simple one, but who knows how the hell it'll happen. Although maybe somebody listening out there might be able to help me with that. And that's to be able to do an episode of this podcast at a place other than Anime North, aside from Anime North. We always look forward to that. But, that's an association we've always been proud of, but maybe I'd like to see how other parts of fandom are too. That's the parts that I don't usually see. So I would love to be able to do an episode of this podcast at another Canadian convention, anime or geekdom. Be able to tape an episode there, and hopefully, I'd like to think James will come along for the ride. He's always good to bounce thoughts off of.
Well, I imagine that if the folks at Anime Revolution do end up starting up a con again next year, I'm sure they don't mind having some more programming.
Well, I saw their email. I saw their mass email. It doesn't sound like anything's inevitable in Toronto at this point. So
they talked about Vancouver.
Yeah, they're talking a lot about Vancouver. Great city, by the way. But,
yeah. Actually, I'll share. there's another one that came to mind that I'll actually share.
Sure. Before we go.
Gonna actually try to go to either Anime NYC, AX, or Inarevo.
Hey, a good one. Hey, a big one. Way to go.
Either July, August, or August.
Yeah. Well, convention season wants to go to something during convention season, but
Wouldn't mind going back to Otakon too, or even AWA, but
you should talk to Dave, see how that went.
well, I don't really know Dave. Like, I've chatted with him before, but like
I chat with him every so often,
I can't say we're like acquainted.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy to talk to. Always
He's always
is.
a good guy to talk to.
Yeah. But just things to think about as we roll over the calendar.
Well,
There you
I
go.
heard we had to keep our June open now, Kevin, and stuff like that, because I heard we're going to Maple Leaf Gardens in June.
We'll talk about that. Yes, TCAF did announce
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Because that was
I
a
heard
very
you-
recent, I think it was last Friday, but it was interesting
Yeah,
that
Will mentioned it to me actually
Mm-hmm.
from Anime Printing.
We got to talk about that a bit later on. We for sure got to talk about that.
But I guess, I guess the location they were at the reference library, they have to do some renovations and whatnot, and they're growing, of course, for TCAF and stuff like that. So I guess they decided to find, obviously, another partner, and they found it, I guess, in Ryerson at the former Maple Leaf Gardens, and they said it'll be a bigger space, but they said, I guess they couldn't do Mother's Day weekend, so they're doing, I think, the first weekend in June. So we'll see how that goes. I wonder if they'll get more people on the Sunday, because I'm not sure. They probably did well on the Sunday. It's just with the Mother's Day, sometimes people have to be at other places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we have done other dates. We did end of April, remember, 2 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that as that date approaches. So there's stuff to think about. Okay. But I think we've gone way over time again. Good work, guys. That's all we got for tonight. AnimeRoundtable@gmail.com, at AnimeRoundtable, AnimeRoundtable.com. And I'm going to say this now, and streaming coming in 2025 as soon as I figure out how to properly hook things up.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I feel I feel the pressure on that, and it's the experiments. I've been experimenting anyway, so there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There, trust me on that. Okay, you don't have to trust me. You see, wait until you see. But at its heart, but once again, this is a podcast. On the podcast side, please leave us a review if you can. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast. Hopefully I'll be able to put this properly on YouTube. Enter in the feed there. And leave us a review, because you know how it is, right, Kevin?
Yeah, 5-star reviews would be great. Although I have had a viewer, or no, I shouldn't say a viewer. I've had a listener mention that you should bring up the type of equipment that you use.
Really?
Yeah.
Since when do people care? Who asked? A friend.
Oh, it's a
Mutual
friend that I know. He's probably going to listen at some point.
Cool.
a lot of people I know on the YouTube,
well,
they say what equipment they use in their videos or podcasts.
Hey, we got plan. We'll get to that eventually.
You can just say it right now.
I'll save that for a stream.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Okay, there you go.
We met quota, so this is our second thing of December, and hopefully we're not done yet. But for now, give us a subscribe, like, or follow on any of the platforms we're on, so you can be notified when we do put up something. For now, it's a podcast, I guess. Have a Spotify account. Please check out the Anime Roundtable playlist for a list of music based on things we've mentioned on this show. The theme song is entitled Fubuki, Snowstorm by Pico Masaki, which is the title track of one of her albums. I know she just released a new album, but in any event, you can check out more of her music, pico at infinity.com, or on Facebook at Pico Zen Music. You could have listened to any anime podcast in the world but you decide to listen to perhaps one of the oldest. And we do appreciate it. So until next time, thanks for listening. Good night from Toronto, and join us again for another edition of the Anime Roundup.